Alright guys, I wanted to go over the tools that I used to do the wheel bearing before I actually edit the video. This is a torque wrench for the lug nuts. As you can see, it's Cobalt, nothing expensive, nothing extravagant. Set it to 150 and torque it till it clicks. Breaker bar for stubborn bolts, which chances are you might run into with the caliper because they are torqued to 150. Pry bar, in case that rust lip gives you any trouble, you can pry on it just a little bit and get it off there. This is to support the caliper. I just use a cheap little bungee. It works great. This is for the CV joint, the grease cap. If it's not corroded, you can use the pick and pliers and it should come right off. I had to kind of tap around it because mine was pretty corroded with the flat blade screwdriver, and then I used the pliers and it came off no problem. I do have a longer ratchet with a flex head, works great. I do have two 18mm wrenches here, one solid, one's ratcheting, so when you break it loose with the solid you can ratchet it with this one if you can't get that socket head in there. These are the only sockets you'll need. 18mm right here, I think it's a 14 for the CV axle half shaft bolt once you get that grease cap off. Now what I ran into was I didn't have to remove the backing plate for the brakes, but they are an 8mm. I did experience though that they were a little corroded, and once I put the 8 on there, that rust broke off and they became a 7. So that's the only thing you would have to worry about. The lug nuts themselves, I use a 19mm. Now that tie rod end, I believe it's a 19mm as well. You can take it off if you want. I did not, didn't need to. I used the wrenches, but I also used PB Blaster. It's great stuff. I highly recommend getting it. Get you a dead blow from Harbor Freight. I do have a 2.5 pound sledge. Just in case the rotor gave me a little trouble, you can tap on the face of it. But it didn't, it came right off. Because I did the brakes before and I put anti-seize on the back of that rotor. C-clamp here to compress the brakes. Again, put this against your brake pad, this against the back of the caliper, and you should be able to compress it and slide that right back on. The STP high temp grease for your wheel bearing. Do use a generous amount in there. And I have a little impact here just to speed things up once I get the bolts loose. If I can get it in there, I do use it. And last but not least, propane, little propane torch. But if you're going to use this, be very careful because you're around brake lines. Brake fluid heats up, it expands rapidly, and also you have a lot of soft joints. Your CV axle boot, the brake lines, the soft lines, etc. They'll melt really quick. So just hit it a little bit and just watch where this is aimed, obviously. But that's all I use, guys. These are tools from Harbor Freight mostly. Got a few Snap-on, but nothing big. And yes, I did go to UNOH, University of Northwestern Ohio, associate's degree in auto diesel technology. But I want to show you guys you can do this at home. You can do it in your driveway. You don't have to pay somebody. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Alright guys, today we are doing a wheel bearing on an 04 F-150. Now I've already gotten the tire off. They are 19mm. And the bolts you're going to need to worry about are 18s for the wheel bearing, 18 for your caliper bracket as well, because we're not going to take the brakes out of the caliper. Now the complaint with this was a lot of vibration, around 60 miles an hour, and what you're going to have is a lot of wear on the tire. And I want to show you the tire once we get it back on. But if you jack the truck up like I've done and you wiggle the tire from the 6 and 12 o'clock position, there shouldn't be any movement. There was movement on this one. So what we're going to do is replace the wheel bearing, and I'm going to work to get all those bolts loose. They're really rusted, so I'm going to set my phone down, get it out of the way. But as you can see right here, I got an 18mm wrench because the socket wouldn't fit on the top. Already busted the top loose, but use a wrench and a dead blow like this, and you just want to hammer that loose. Once you get it loose, you can use a ratcheting wrench or a socket, or the wrench itself. Might take a little longer, but you can use that to get it loose. So that's what we're going to do now. I'll get those bolts loose from the caliper bracket and we'll go from there. All right, we have the caliper off now. These two bolts are both 18mm. Once you compress the caliper, this will come off the rotor. Make sure that you support the caliper with a zip tie, bungees or something, because of this line right here. You do not want it to break. And what we're trying to get off now is the wheel bearing itself. You can see you got two bolts here and two bolts just like it on the bottom. They are also 18s. Once you get that off, we can slide the caliper off and we'll check, or the wheel bearing rather, and we'll check and make sure that it has grease in it, and clean it out, get new grease in it, and replace it with, there's a clip, can't really see it very good, but right there where my finger is at is a clip, and that clip will come undone, and the speed sensor, all of it, it's an integrated hub, all this will come off and we will replace it with the new one. All right, we've gotten the wheel bearing 18mm bolts out. Now this right here holds on the half shaft, or holds it to the half shaft rather, and that is a 13mm. Once you get that off, you should be able to remove the wheel bearing. Just remember that clip up here, and we're going to do that now, and then I'll show you the inside of the wheel bearing, where all the bearings are and how I clean it out, all that good stuff. One thing that I wanted to mention was that this little cap sits right here, and see how corroded that is. What I did was I just hit it with a flathead screwdriver here, give it a turn, hit it here, give it a turn, hit it here, and then once I saw it, a little space between it and the body, kind of like that, I just took a pair of pliers like so, gripped the head, wiggled it, and it came right loose. And then you have where your half shaft sits, and you can see this bearing caused a little bit of heat right there, but I have cleaned it out or wiped some of the old grease that was packed in here out. You want to have high temp grease. Usually it's a red color. You can get it at your auto parts store. You don't have to order it from Amazon or anything, but I will, in the description below, put the wheel bearing that I used. It's from Detroit Axle. It's a pretty good brand. I've used them before with a lot of luck. But basically what you do now is you'll put your other bearing in and get the holes lined up and situate your bolts. This plug right here, I want to show you the connector on it. This connector right here, you just give this a press down like that, and it'll come loose. Just a little 2-prong connector, and you can tell it's right here. I'll show you, kind of back up and show you where it was. And a little 2-prong connector. You really can't mess it up. It does have a little indicator right here to which way things go in. And we're going to go back together now. Now on other videos, they take the tie rod end apart. They take this off. I wanted to show you guys how you can do it on the ground in your backyard, and you don't have to call anybody. It can be done, but these are 7s and 8s. If you want to take this off, I believe this is a 19, but we're going to go back together now. All right, guys, I just wanted to show you real quick what this grease looked like. STP premium grease, high temp. But if you turn it to the side here, you can see right here in the or it's this side here, sorry, you can see right here, fifth wheels, high temperature grease. Right here's wheel bearings. Maybe I can get it to focus. The light's giving me a little bit of trouble, but I think you can make it out right there. There's wheel bearings, but this is where you can look for it. Like I said, you get this advanced AutoZone, and then also here's our new one, nice and shiny, ready to go. And again, here's your clip with the index right here, so you know how to plug it in. Now we're gonna go ahead and pack this, and you want to use a generous amount where the needle bearings are as well, and the inside of it. You want to make sure this thing is lubricated really good so it doesn't develop heat like this right here. We got the new wheel bearing on. Now what I did was these 18mm bolts here, right here, I ran them all the way down, finger tight, before I snug them up. And we have the grease in there. And like I said, always make sure your caliper is supported. But now we're going to tighten those up. Then we'll put our rotor back on, brake caliper bolts, and I'm also going to show you guys how to compress the caliper to fit over the rust lip. But you can see the line here, it just fits in these little clips, clip here, and then of course you have your plug-in up here, which I put a little dielectric grease in. You don't have to, but it keeps the corrosion out of it and all that good stuff, the road grime. But we'll get the rotor back on next, and then the, like I said, brake caliper, and take it for a test drive. Alright guys, so this lug nut here, I run it all the way down to keep the rotor on while I'm trying to put the caliper bracket on. Now I don't use any fancy tool to compress the brake. I just use one of these right here. It's called a C-clamp, and when you compress it, put this part on the inside of the brake pad, this side on the out right here, and simply tighten it up, and you'll feel the inner brake go towards the piston, and it opens it wider so you can slide it on the rotor easy, getting it over what's called a rust lip. And that's your rust lip right there. That's where your brake pad rides. This is your rust lip. But just little tricks, little tips to make it easier on you guys. Now we're going to take our lug nut off, and all that's left is to get the wheel on, pump the brakes a couple of times to get the brake pad seated against the rotor, and we will be good to go for a test drive.